So just before midnight, December 5, 1981, a 17-year-old guy called Robie Drake, he wanders into an area of the suburbs of Buffalo. And this is an area that often has an abundance of abandoned cars.
Oh, okay.
It's just, how they roll. So he leaves his house, he's carrying rifles and hunting knives, and he's wearing military clothes.
Rifles?
It's fine, it's for self-defense. He had a goal. His goal was to shoot up some abandoned cars.
Oh.
So he turns his gun onto a 12-year-old Chevy and fires into the passenger side window 19 times.
Mm-hmm.
Then he heard groaning inside the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
He'd shot Stephen Rosenthal, 18, and Amy Smith, 16.
Oh, I mean, it was going to be sad whoever it was, but
particularly Amy and Steve.
Well, I had a soft spot for Amy and Steve.
You did.
I thought they were going to make it.
You took it. I thought for once these two.
Yeah, I thought
these are the people.
High school sweethearts.
No one said that. They could just be fingering buddies who met that moment.
Well, whatever, well, that's high school sweethearts.
That's true, actually. This place where it's got abandoned cars and stuff, it turns out it's also a popular lover's lane.
Yeah, well, I hear that now.
Yeah.
Is there a street that it starts with an F, like Avenue, cul-de-sac? Fairway. Fuckers Fairway. Fuckers Fairway. That's
Porker's Parade.
Yeah, Porker's Parade. That's all right. Because Lover's Lane.
Anal Avenue.
Well,
it's a bit more specific.
And it's also very, like, if you drive to Anal Avenue with your partner, like, you should probably talk about that in advance.
What are we doing here? Nothing.
Just hoping.
I don't know. What do you want?
Cunnilingus close.
Ooh. He hears Rosenthal moaning, the boy, so he stabs him.
Okay.
See, the knives came in.
So I get this. Okay. There is a rumor that policy incentives in a certain country, a country with a lot of people, made it recently so that if you accidentally hit someone in your car, you are better off, much better off, reversing over them to make sure they are dead.
You are better off.
Yeah, not that. I don't know what this guy is doing that suddenly you go, I've accidentally shot someone. I had a plausible story. Now I'm going to stab him.
He was spotted by two police officers who were just patrolling, stuffing the body into the trunk of the Chevy.
So you've gone, I was just here to shoot up some cars and now I'm stuffing a body in.
Well, in fact, two bodies. So Rosenthal.
Chevys have a big boot.
Big by our standards. By American standards, they're like, what? I can only put half my household in.
It's a 1970s car, man. You can fit
69.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So you could fit a lot of corpses in a boot.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, they catch him doing it. He's obviously got all the weapons on him. These people are being shot to death with a little bit of stabbing in one case. Open and shut case. Yeah?
Yeah, it's to me.
Well.
What?
So Drake insists, whole time, all through the trials and everything, it was a mistake. It was target practice, dude. It was dark. I thought the car was abandoned, but then I panicked when I heard Rosenthal moaning, so obviously I stabbed the shit out of him.
I panicked and went murder.
Yeah.
That's my panic solution.
That's what I do. I'm like, I got a deadline. I'm not going to make it work. I kill someone.
Yeah, well, I kill the person that asked for the deadline.
Oh, no, I kill the nearest person.
Mine's more effective.
Yeah, but mine's more panicky. Mine's just raw panic, instant.
I have filtered panic. I have
distilled panic. Yours is hard. It's harder for you to claim panic on the stand because it's like you thought about it, whereas I'm like, nearest person.
Kill someone. Kill someone.
Yep, just kill the nearest person.
Oh, my God.
So it sounded dodgy, of course. This sounds like really, dude.
Mm-hmm.
But Drake had no other apparent or any apparent motive.
Okay.
Intent matters whether it's murder, manslaughter, etc.
No, I get that.
So the prosecutor, a guy called Peter Broderick, went, I need clear intent to make this murder. And he thinks it's murder. He actually thought Drake may have had a motive. And why did he think this? He thought maybe the faint marks on Amy Smith's body were a sign of post-mortem biting and probably evidence of some kind of sex crime.
Okay.
So he brings in a forensic odontologist. That's my third career choice. Is doctor, lawyer, forensic odontologist.
No, I don't want to look at teeth. Whether it's dead people or alive people or evidence of teeth marks, that's not my thing.
Yeah, I don't want to do that job. Corpse teeth, fuck yeah, and other things. So he brings in this forensic odontologist to testify to the effect that this is post-mortem biting. But to make the leap to sex crime, the odontologist said, look, I can't make that. You need more firming up on this case. You need a different expert. And so he tells the prosecutor that he just met this guy at a conference of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences.
I got a guy.
So the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the AAFS. The man was Richard Walter, who 30 years later would be described in a publisher's weekly blurb on a book about him as a figure who seems to be a contemporary Sherlock Holmes.
Welcome to The Wholesome Show, the podcast that sees things no one else sees in the whole of science.
Yes, we do.
I'm Will Grant.
I can see you, R.G. Lamberts. Now, I want to say before I keep going, there was one monster source for this. So it was an article from April this year, 23, by David Galvey Herbert in the New York magazine. I'm not going to tell you the title because it kind of
Gives it away.
gives shit away.
I get it.
So who is this Richard Walter guy? So in 82, he'd just become a full member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the AAFS. And this is apparently, according to the article, a powerful credential. Okay. It mattered. I'm a full member.
But I get you actually have a pretty heavy sway in people getting put away in jail or not. So.
Forensic sciences matter. So, he just got this full credential in 82. So this is basically when the trial for Robie Drake happens. So he's on the stand at Drake's trial and he's asked to, tell us about your credentials, sir. So he relates his resume, like I've reviewed more than 5,000 murder cases at the LA County Medical Examiner's Office, 5,000.
That's a lot.
Adjunct lecturer at a Northern Michigan University. He'd written criminology papers. He'd served as an expert witness at hundreds of trials.
Okay.
So you're kind of going, hey, okay, dude.
Know some stuff.
I feel like you're onto it. So Walter told the jury that Drake had committed a particular type of lust murder because he was driven by a phenomenon known as piquerism.
Piquerism.
As in Piquerer, piquerism, which is an obscure sadistic impulse to derive sexual pleasure from penetrating people with bullets, knives, and teeth.
I don't want to yuck people's yum. There are some yums.
We got a spin-off podcast.
We say no.
Yucking the yum.
No, we don't yuck the yum, except some yums.
So we can yuck the yum. But
some yums.
Yes.
Yums that involve doing that.
Yeah, and I like the obscure sadistic impulse. So like, how about...
Oh, I want it to be obscure. I absolutely, I would tolerate a world where
obscure doesn't mean rare.
Yeah.
You want rare.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not synonyms.
Obscure means not talked about.
Yeah, not clear, not
that
obvious.
That means that guy across the street could be.
Or someone in this room. So Drake's attorney, who, trying to defend this, said, look, I'm finding it hard to find an expert on piquerism. Can I have a bit more time to get one?
Okay.
Judge said, no, let's get rolling.
Get the best you got. Get out on the street.
Just
give me what you got. I don't want to sit around waiting for.
Get a psychologist.
Yeah,
just get a psychologist. Let's get on with it. So Drake was convicted of second-degree murder and got 2 consecutive terms of 20 years to life. And Richard Walter's testimony, was absolutely key.
Okay.
So he billed the prosecutor $300, which in 1982, which is a decent week's salary for a reasonable earner.
No, I get it. It's a week's salary. I think it's in that bracket.
So the trial of Robie Drake, the end of his freedom from this trial, was the beginning of Walter's new career in the fledgling field of criminal profiling.
Oh. Cool, huh? I got some feelings.
Do you now?
Yeah, maybe.
So profiling, a little bit of context on it. So in the entire of the decade of the 1970s, the FBI's behavioral science unit and the profilers within consulted on less than 200 cases across that whole decade. By the mid-'80s, hundreds per year of profiling consults.
Okay. So suddenly it's become a thing.
Yeah, it really took off.
Profiling.
Early to mid-'80s.
So what is profiling?
Kind of, you can characterize, you can look at certain facts and figures, or, you can make deductions.
So this person died by stab wounds, so probably the killer had brown hair.
But it was left-handed with a slight angle, therefore they had an elbow injury when they were 12. But
mostly psych, not body.
More psychological profiles.
Yeah.
It began to attract really big personalities, and there's a forensic psychiatrist who'd been working with the behavioral science unit with these guys, and he said, look, it really attracts big personalities. Where there are stars, there are wannabe stars, and those with big egos will often gravitate to the centers of narcissistic glory. So it was big. People were, this is big shit. And soon after this, so into the late 80s and early 90s, it became a pop culture sensation, particularly because 1991, Silence of the Lambs.
Yes. Yep. Clarice, she was a profiler.
She was.
Was she?
Yeah, or training to be. But I think actually really Hannibal was the profiler. So anyway, that movie pushed it off. And the FBI agent who helped Jodie Foster prepare described this period as a, quote, very exciting time. They're dynamic people, these FBI agents. So basically the Drake case was like perfectly timed for Richard Walter to be on the crest of the profiling wave. It was just coincidental timing. It actually was. I'm not going to pull a Swiftie on that. It was just good timing.
Yeah.
So how did Richard Walter get to become this profiler? AKA, how do you become better yet eventually?
He reviewed 5,000 murder cases.
Sherlock. Well, that would probably help.
I think that's what gets you. So if you listen to 5,000 murder podcasts, then you're a profiler.
So he graduated from Michigan State Uni in 75. He had a bachelor's and a master's degree in psych. At 33, he gets an entry-level position as a lab assistant at the LA County Medical Examiner's Office, and he washes test tubes for $3 an hour.
Oh.
He thought about going into a PhD, but then he got a job in 1978 as a staff psychologist at a prison. So that's cool. You didn't need a PhD for that. Master's was enough. And that's fair. Back in that time,
fair enough.
Quite reasonable. So he'd be able to see patients and he wouldn't need to go further with his quals. But apparently he had a crappy rapport with prisoners and he could be really petty and vindictive. So, for example, an inmate sued him after he refused to pass along a dictionary that was sent to the inmate by his mother, just because he was in the shits. It also didn't help that he would often conduct interviews through the closed prison cell door. So he'd talk to them through the door.
Oh, okay. I ain't a prison psych, so I don't know how easy that job is. I don't assume it's on the Clarice interviewing Hannibal Lecter to your job is reviewing pina coladas on the beach. It's closer to Clarice, like it is, but
Can I mix them?
Sure.
Can I have the pina colada while I'm talking to a cannibal?
While I'm talking to a cannibal.
So anyway, otherwise they're too sweet. So he basically apparently mostly he'd run intake interviews. So we're not talking Arkham here. We're not talking freaking the Joker and so on. It's a standard reasonable prison, whatever that means. And so another psych from the prison system said that what he basically ended up doing was what this guy called meatball stuff. You basically talk to the prisoners for a little while, make sure they're not totally crazy. That was his job. That's fine. It's a job. You need to do it. You got to kind of get an assay or initial assessment. But outside of the job, he would tout his unique insights into the criminal mind. He'd say, look, because of this job, the shit I learn about criminals.
Who's he touting it to?
People.
Just
beyond.
On the street?
And beyond.
Okay.
Including, so he'd become a regular at the conferences of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. So he was, mixing in the circles and saying, I'd talk to crims all the time.
Yep.
And he does. He interviews them and chats with them and stuff. So this is in, it was the early 80s. So by 1987, he was telling a prosecutor for a particular case that he was one of maybe 10 or so criminal profilers, only 10 or so, trusted by the FBI. So, he's moved up, doing well. He gives speeches like, lust, arson, and rape, a factorial approach. You're like,
so it's very,
work them up and drop them down.
Your title's good, but your subheading,
You're like, lust, arson, and rape, stats. Another one, anger biting, the hidden impulse. Now, we've all had that. Like, I've sat in meetings where I've gone, I'm going to anger bite someone.
Oh, I've thought about it.
Exactly. So apparently his audiences really loved his entertaining wry style. And as one attendee at a 1989 conference of the Association of Police Surgeons of Great Britain.
Police surgeons?
Police surgeons. I only operate on cops.
Or is it cops that do operations?
A bit of both.
You're under arrest, liver.
The Venn diagram is I am a cop and I only operate on cops.
I don't understand how many of those there are. This sounds like a made-up job.
Well, it's England. They're all made up.
Yeah, well, of course.
They have nobilities.
Yeah, and they got villages called Thumpety Barswile.
Throckmorton, Throbnob.
Exactly, but still, Throbnob.
Throbnob. But you got to add extra syllables that you don't pronounce. Like it's spelt St. John's Smitherton, but it's pronounced sailing boat yat. So anyway, he's this one person who was, as I was quoted as an amused attendee, said his story had to be heard from his own mouth. You had to hear Walter himself. It would, if you gave it to someone else repeated his stories, it just wouldn't be the same.
Yeah,
you need to hear it from the guy.
Yeah, cool. He was the one in front of the prison. Like he interviewed Hannibal. He's right there.
Yeah, it's like this podcast. If someone else read exactly what we were saying, it'd be different. So anyway, what was his style? He got married in 1963 when he was 20, but then divorced 10 months later because his wife cited mental cruelty. So it just sounds like he might have been a bit of a cock.
I think he's not a nice person.
But smart people can be cocks.
We have talked about arseholes on this show before. I'm saying he could be well in the arsehole.
He could be.
Whilst doing maybe something that's interesting. Anyway.
He's also described as a cadaverous chain smoker with an acid sense of humour and a hard-to-place, vaguely English accent. And I didn't have a picture of him, but there are many of them out there. He is vampiric. He is so lean, like he is gaunt almost. Oh. And he would boast about how he survived on cigarettes and cheeseburgers.
What a combo.
So he smokes cools. He likes to sip a Chardonnay. And apparently he was never photographed in anything, or he's still alive, never photographed in anything but a dark suit. And according to the main source, a tiny smile often curling at the corner of his mouth. So he was also known for what one source calls a colourful language. He knew how to give, quote, delicious cinematic quotes, and he cultivated his eccentricities for journalists and producers.
Yeah, I get it.
He once yelled at a suspect,
Yelled at a suspect.
I'll chew your dick down so far you won't have enough left to fuck roadkill.
Like, okay. Like, so you probably can't yell that at a suspect. I don't know.
Are you a cadaverous genius who exists on cigarettes and cheeseburgers?
Like, what is the scenario where the rest of the people in the room, the courtroom, the classroom, just look at you and go,
thanks, Walt. We're going to ignore that. What do you do?
We still kind of need you here, Walt. We can't kick you out, so we need you. But can we just redact that? I'll chew your dick down so much. No, he's workshopped that. Night before, he was like, I need an insult. You're going to have a tiny dick for roadkill. I'll chew your dick down.
Roadkill fucker. Close. It's got to hone it a little bit more. Roadkill too. Roadkill. To be fair,
I'll chew your dick down.
Yeah.
It says something about you that it's like,
it does.
That's what I'm going to do.
It does.
I'm gonna.
Do you know how I'm going to get you? It involves chewing your dick.
It's a gnawing thing. I'm going to get a gnawing.
I know. I read that and thought, I don't even know what to make of this.
It's not really an insult. It's not like you're a shit person. It's like I'm gonna
do a weird, horrible thing to you so that you can't do a thing you've probably never wanted to do ever.
Sex crimes on you so hard.
So that you can't do something that probably almost no one in the world has ever even thought about, better yet done anyway. Another description of him was from 2008, so a bit later. UK Telegraph. He is reluctant to reveal his age. The quote is, "That's a state secret. I'm in 6th decade, and of course I don't look like it."
Oh, okay.
No, he's that skinny. He looks older. The reporter also was told by him, much of my work is highly confidential, so my high-profile stuff has been under the radar. It's in the shadows.
Yeah, that's like my girlfriend in Canada.
Yep, exactly.
Like, all of my big cases. Yeah. I won the Nobel Prize in Canada, but it's a unique Nobel Prize.
You don't know about it. You wouldn't have heard.
They wouldn't publish it
because you've got to be in the elite.
Yeah, exactly.
And he also said, look, I'm always just a consultant because it gives me more freedom.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he says that they say also he's not keen on having his photo taken, but there is no other source nor anything else I saw that suggests that's true. Anyway, it's fair to say that he basically stood out and he was into it. So
he's cultivating.
Yeah, he's cultivating.
Yeah.
But of course, being an attention-attracting lone wolf, not enough. Got to go further. Let's blow this shit up. So 89-90, he's at an AAFS, the Forensic Society conference, and he meets forensic sculptor Frank Bender.
Forensic sculptor.
Forensic sculptor.
Fuck yes.
I know.
No, and not to say, you're art school people that couldn't make merousal art, so you just, do murder scenes. It's still fucking cool. And
you do beautiful
I do. Rodin did The Thinker and The Thinker getting murdered.
Yeah.
Like that was his.
I did The Disemboweler. And my stuff is so horrifying, it's impossible to understand. That, my friends,
oh my God, forensic sculptor. Tell me more about this job.
So apparently in the 70s, Bender, the forensic sculptor, he'd done a bunch of night classes doing painting. So he wasn't officially in the unis and the art schools. So he did night classes.
Sure.
But he wanted to be able to see, as he put it, in the round, like the 3Ds.
Yeah,
he wanted to get a better idea of that.
That's the sculptor.
Exactly.
I want to see the front and the back.
Exactly.
The butt and the
non-butt.
The non-butt, yeah.
The front butt.
Yeah, exactly.
So he started going to sculpture classes as a result of that. He wanted to see things in the round.
Cool.
But there are no anatomy lessons available to these mere night students.
Yeah.
So a friend of his who worked in a medical examiner's office said, do you want to come in and sit on in some autopsies?
Yeah, of course. That's the next jump. Yeah, of course.
I want to sculpt. No anatomy lessons, autopsies.
I want to see people all the way around.
Yeah.
The only way to see is autopsies.
Dead people getting cut up.
Yeah, it would be impossible to find another way to see people all the way around.
In 3 dimensions. I know, I've never seen one.
No. Like, even if you go, all right, clothes obscure a little bit, but you can kind of look at a person. Like
you can.
I can see they have
But he
arms.
really wanted to see the person. Yeah. So he says, I go to the morgue. My friend shows me around. Body's been cut up and burnt. They had this one woman. Her whole body was decomposed. They didn't know what she looked like or who she was. So the woman had been shot in the head. The bullet had smashed her skull open.
Oh.
Bender says to his friend, as he puts it, just out of conversation. So he's having a chat. I reckon I could show you what that woman would look like. I could use a sculpture and recreate her features.
Based on evidence?
No, based on using the structure of what's left and then kind of theorizing from there. 5 months later, he does this. 5 months later, they identified the woman.
All right.
She had gone to Philadelphia to collect money on a property deal that had gone bad, and she'd basically been mafia-style executed by a contract killer. And it took another 20 years for this person to get caught. But because of his sculptures, they went,
sculpting.
We know who the fuck this is.
No, that's cool. All right, that's cool. That's cool.
Apparently, Bender had a gift for facial reconstruction, so he was called to work more on these cases. He started to get used by the FBI, federal marshals, etc., and he was helping people find criminals. Like he was actually doing shit. So this is Bender. So Bender's met Walter at a conference, and Bender goes, I'm going to introduce you to my buddy Bill Fleischer. So Fleischer was already a big fan of the sculptor, and Fleischer himself, so he knew a great deal about murder, was the quote. He'd been in the FBI in the early 70s, and he worked in an area in Boston that was known as the Combat Zone. And later he was working on organized crime, and he described the people he arrested as characters out of a B-grade novel. So Bender, Walter, and Fleischer all start hanging out. And they hit it off. They loved each other. So they cooked up this idea. They said, look, what we're going to do is pull together a bunch of like-minded law enforcement types, and we'll meet and talk about murder regularly over lunch. But the group needed a name. The Vidocq Society, V-I-D-O-C-Q, Vidocq, named after a guy called Eugène-François Vidocq. He was a 17th century French criminal who turned into a detective and is considered the father of modern criminology. So at first they would meet for lunch. They'd go to Philadelphia restaurants or social clubs. They'd talk about historical and cold cases, murder-related, always historical cold cases. So early members, they had jobs like customs agents, IRS, Internal Revenue Service investigators, U.S. Marshals.
Also, anyone can join. It's not
as long as you had a law.
Yeah. Come along. Bring your cold case. Let's have a chat. I get like following through a cold case. Damn, that's cool.
It's interesting.
Like
it is interesting.
It's fascinating. It's interesting, and the idea that you could potentially. It's gravy.
Well, I agree. So they got a lot of these sort of law-ish people, and some were a little less credible, like they're into polygraphs and something called statement analysis. I don't know much about it. But not many had a lot of experience with actual murders, homicides, but they were at least in sort of related, cognate fields. So they started talking about cold cases, but soon they started to talk about more recently unsolved murders, and they thought, fuck, maybe we could help catch killers. So profiling was popular, as we said, but the FBI didn't want to get a lot of media attention, so these guys kind of went, we don't mind. So they kind of filled this vacuum, and they very quickly they got some, newspaper articles written about them and stuff. And it was very easy because the three founders were summarized like this. Walter was the chain-smoking genius. Bender was the artist, conspicuous among the suits in T-shirt and jeans. Fleischer was the teddy bear G-man, prone to tearing up during presentations. So it's fucking crack. It's media, pop culture crack. Absolute crack. So, of course, then TV comes calling. So there's many examples. I'll just give you one. CBS, 48 Hours. They filmed the society considering a particular case. So Zoya Azur, 27-year-old who's found dead in the woods in New Jersey.
Boyfriend did it.
Yep. Fiancé is Ken Andronico. He's an ophthalmologist.
Ken Andronico?
Andronico. Fiancé said, I don't think it was a suicide. I think she was murdered. And a friend of his said, I know who to go to help. So they go to the Vidocq Society. So Fleischer gets up at the meeting of the society and says, I'm going to present you the facts. So he presents the facts to them. And this is while it's being filmed by CBS's 48 Hours. So the host of the show, a guy called Schlesinger, apparently he races around the rooms immediately after the facts have been presented. He wants to solicit theories. So he runs up to them and says, murder or suicide, while they're eating their lunch. And a whole bunch of them, they blurt out through their mouths, murder, definitely. And Schlesinger says, with delight apparently, we haven't even gotten to dessert yet and they already know it's a murder. Like, how fucking tops is this?
They don't know it's a murder. They're just saying it over their chips. I mean.
Apparently it was chicken masala.
All right.
So Walter then turns to the camera and says, look, I think Andronico might have been himself the killer. He's playing that high-risk game of catch me if you can, he says with an enigmatic smile.
Told you.
It was a boyfriend.
It was a boyfriend.
It was a boyfriend.
Like, I'm sorry, but 99% of cold cases.
Yeah, it was the loved one. But, of course, the problem with that was Andronico was in Florida at the time of her death in New Jersey.
Shit.
Oops. But that didn't stop the show from airing. So his patients, he's an ophthalmologist, they began cancelling their appointments. His medical practice was almost destroyed, even though he was never, ever at all charged with anything.
Yeah.
And a retired detective from New Jersey, from that actual county, said, look, the Vidocq Society never looked at the file. They never had any statements. They never had any medical records.
It really is. Look, you can imagine, the best version of these, the modern podcasters is like, we go out there and we solve a cold case. We dig up old facts. We put our investigative eye to this that's never been done before. And there's clearly good examples out there. Yeah. But you can imagine the other version where a bunch of people just go, I reckon.
I think what you mean is all the other versions.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just go, it was this or it was that. And it's like.
This one must be true because it's got truth in this.
Oh, God.
And the final call from the detective was, I thought it was preposterous.
Yeah.
But so what? Huh? Fame was growing. The society was getting famous, and Walter, as the man, was at the center of all the fame. They continued to meet and they'd make pronouncements, and Walter's career as a profiler grew and grew and grew and grew. Well, fast forward to 2009. So there's an author, a guy called Michael Capuzzo. So he was given a apparently unusually large advance to write a book, $800,000 advance to write a book, because he'd written a book on sharks or something before and people thought it was pretty good. So he gets commissioned to write this book on the Vidocq Society, and it's called The Murder Room, The Heirs of Sherlock Holmes Gather to Solve the World's Most Perplexing Cold Cases. And it was published in 2011. The blurb that I talked about at the beginning, which was from the publishers, led by a figure who seems to be a contemporary Sherlock Holmes, it added in the book also Walter's reflection on how Scotland Yard would refer to him as the living Sherlock Holmes. So the book sold, or has sold, at least 100,000 copies, and includes pearls about Walter. I love these. Like, he is the angel of vengeance. And another one.
I don't want to be described even positively as the angel of vengeance.
Look, I'm not going to lie, a little bit of me wouldn't want it, but what would I have to do to earn it? That's the part I don't want. So another description that came from this book was Walter is the ferryman poling parents of murdered children through the blood tides of woe. It's pretty sweet.
The ferryman.
I know. So the book repeated and expanded on many entries from Walter's resume, but it seemed some of these entries may not have been quite true.
What? No.
It's possible.
What?
It's possible.
Why would you tell me about someone who's...
It's possible. Here's a big call. This one, I'm going straight to some of the big guns. This is nuclear. So in the book, it repeats Walter's claim that he solved the notorious 1986 murder of Anita Cobby, which is a famous Australian murder. She was a former beauty queen who was, gang raped and nearly beheaded.
Oh, Jesus.
So there's a detective, Ian Kennedy, who led the investigation, never heard of Walter at all. Never heard of him, better yet, that he solved it. There's another one, case of a murder of a guy called Paul Bernard Alain. So this was brought to the Vidocq Society by Paul Alain's boss, Antoine Le Havre. So Walter quickly decided that Le Havre the boss, had actually murdered Alain because of a homosexual affair gone wrong. Oh, I know what happened. They're actually gay. They had sex.
This is the version of profiling where you can go, to a cobbler, the world is a shoe.
Yeah.
And if you're like, it's all repressed gay sex everywhere, every single murder is just going to be a repressed version. It's like,
It's like you can read through my notes.
Yeah.
So, he said that's what it was. But, of course, it turns out, so the reporter in this article I've been drawing on, Alain and Le Havre don't seem to have appeared in any legal documents or public recorded databases at all. So it could be that Capuzzo, the author, had changed the names, or Walter just made the whole thing up. So this links to what you've kind of flagged by accident, a possible, let's call it a strong interest of Walter's.
Yeah.
He seemed to have a bit of a preoccupation with linking murders to sex crimes or homosexuality.
Yeah. And clearly some are, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Definitely some are. Yeah, maybe just had a problem with homosexuality in general. It's hard to say. So, for example, 2002, a couple of Texas police officers, they asked for the society's help. They had a cold case. So there's a report from 2003 that said that Walter had a private conversation after the lunch with these two officers, and he said, it's definitely a case of homosexual panic, which is one man kills the other one after a tryst.
I'm feeling patterns here. I'm feeling patterns.
I don't know what you're talking about. This panic theory seems to have come from one of Walter's papers, Homosexual Panic and Murder.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a case study based on interviews he had with an inmate who murdered a dude and then cut off one of the dude's testicles. That's the whole case. The whole paper is based on that one case.
Yeah.
The guy murdered another guy, cut off one of his balls. Homosexual panic.
Yeah.
So one of the Texas cops says, look, it seemed like it didn't matter what the case was. He just thought it was something to do with sexual deviancy.
But the homosexual panic, like, I don't know what places this is in, but people have raised this as a defense.
Yep.
If suddenly the person you're having sex with you realize is of different gender or is trans or something like that, and there's a panic defense and you're like, oh, you're allowed to murder them. It's like, fuck, you're not.
No.
It's a murder.
What we know for sure, shame is a bizarrely powerful emotion.
Sure,
it can do wacky things to people.
But it is. And okay, so you a bit of your brain snapped. Sorry, you still go to jail. There are people that have used this as a defense where they're like, no, I didn't.
I freaked out because I suddenly realized I was banging a dude.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, you should have killed him then. You're right. Off you go. But so the cops said, he'd seemed to bring all his cases round to this, and they disagreed with that. But he also said that Walter didn't help them at all and they didn't solve the case. In a testimony about a different murder, Richard Walter asserts, the homosexual, not really a man. He is, I quote, a discount person. Therefore,
what is a man?
Well, not a homosexual, according to this profiler. And then he goes on from this, he's a discount person. Therefore, this is a direct quote.
Discount person.
Discount person.
Like, you get him a $2 shop.
Yeah, you get $5 for a buck.
What the fuck?
Therefore, he says, if I need to be great, if I need to satisfy my ego, if I need to satisfy my needs for power, if I need to surmount, if I need to have a demonstration of my power, well, what better way to do it? Okay, murder. It seems like maybe he has a thing.
Yeah, okay.
That's not the only thing he has. He's got a lot of things, but this seems to be one of them. So everything seems to come back to sexual deviancy. And I read something that suggested of the 100 or so papers he claims to have written, I'm not sure if he did or he didn't, at least a core to have something to do with this sort of stuff.
Okay.
Anyway, so this is all coming out in the book, the Murder Room book. What do the co-founders of the Vidocq Society think? Bender, the sculptor, there are parts of the book that I know are not true.
Mm.
He died in July 2011, so we don't know much more. We're not sure about Fleischer because he was apparently hard to interview, but it seems pretty clear that both of them thought Capuzzo, the author, took a lot of artistic license, let's just say. But Walter didn't give a shit. He went off on a nationwide book tour with the author, and he was in his element. It was going great. And there's a great quote here that says, Walter says to the listeners of, I assume it was radio, there's a price to pay, but I'm willing to pay it for doing this kind of job. Capuzzo, the author, has not written another book since, and today he publishes a Substack promoting vaccine conspiracy theories, so that went well for him.
Cool.
So let's go back to the beginning. Drake, the original, Robie Drake, the original trial. So in 1995, Drake was still he was decades into his sentence,
so he was convicted in the 80s.
Convicted
early 80s?
in the 80s, early 80s. So 1995, he still got a lot left, but he was from prison as best he could, digging into Walter, his resume, his background, etc.
Oh, okay. So he's doing research on the profiler.
He's having a rummage.
The profile.
He's having a rummage.
Fuck yeah.
He's got a wife who helped from the outside, who helps request documents, who also got in touch with former employers.
That's a thing.
Yeah. So it became very clear Walter had perjured himself in many ways in the proceedings of this trial. So the one I kicked off with, I started with these list of credentials. So he claimed at the LA Counter's medical office that he'd done 5,000 murder cases. Not one.
What? What do you mean? No,
just not true. Just not true.
Reviewed. Like not reviewed true. Means you looked at.
This is where he was doing the test tube cleaning. He said he was an adjunct lecturer at a Northern Michigan university. At the time, at least, he'd spoken there informally, maybe only just once.
Well,
which is not the same as an adjunct lecturer. He talked about his criminology papers. At least at the time, he'd not published anything. Well, served as an expert witness at hundreds of trials. At the time, it looked like he'd maybe testified in 2 cases, one about simple chain of evidence and one in a civil suit against a car company. So it's not tops.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not tops. So Drake appeals, of course. He says, this guy's a fucking maniac. But the court said, no, we deny it. We're not going to even hear it. I don't know why. So his wife then goes on and sends a dossier, 13 pages, to the American Academy of Forensic Science and says, here's all the horseshit about Walter. So officials at the organisation had some internal memos and they said, look, yeah, we can see that he padded his resume, but look, we don't want to get too deeply into this. So the chairman of their ethics committee wrote, we really do have to worry about public appearances.
Yeah, so it's better to keep it all quiet.
So 1996, they write a letter back to Drake's wife. The chair writes this, and he says, look, most of the issues do not involve the Academy's code of ethics.
Our ethics says make stuff up, and that'll be fine so long as people that look pretty guilty go to jail.
Yeah, look at him.
Yeah.
Clearly bites people after he stabbed them.
I'm still not with this Drake guy that he did some stabbing after the shooting that might have been an accident and stuffed some bodies into the boot. Like,
stay with me. So the committee, this is the final line. The committee has concluded unanimously that there was no misrepresentation and therefore no code violation. So no, he's fine. So it gets weirder though. So even though the district attorney in this case with Robbie Drake insisted in a bunch of memos that he was suspicious of Walter, he said, "Oh look, no, this guy's dodgy." Then he learned about the Robbie Drake case and he resolved not to rely on him. So he heard about this. He went, "No, I'm not going to rely on him." But he still apparently parroted Walter's entire theory in his closing arguments. He's like, "No, this guy's dodgy. I've heard about him." But then he still just did exactly what he said.
I'm still going to use it.
Yeah, I'm going to use it anyway. And also, and you kind of flagged this, it didn't help that like Drake actually had killed 2 people. Like he had actually fucking killed them.
Yeah, but it could have been, look, there could have been different ways that killing happened.
There could have been, but it's still like, you actually kill people. And so in the public mind, juries, etc., they're kind of like, So Drake kept fighting, of course, even though that didn't work. 2003, federal judge, after a bunch of stuff, wrote that Walter, the witness, was a charlatan. His testimony was, medically speaking, nonsense. Balls, mate. New trial. Prosecutors brought in new techniques. So they got a technique for analysing bullet trajectories, and they looked at that and went, okay, let's look at the bullet trajectories. It appears from that Drake was actually closer to the car than they first thought, so he probably did know the people inside.
Wildly, like a long time after the fact to be doing that, but yeah.
Well, he called for it. This is so 2009. They said, look,
this is 1981 when it happened. All right.
Yeah. 2010, a jury convicted Drake again of the murders. So he definitely exposed Walter as a fraud. That was unambiguous. He was a fraud. But the judge said, look, yeah, this guy was terrible, but you definitely did this. So his sentence was extended by another 10 years.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
A different TV show, 2020, there was a segment where they came into the town when this happened, and the guy, the producer said, look, when you show up in a town with a couple of thousand people with a bunch of cameras and stuff, it has impact. And it's kind of like, oh, maybe we had an influence. Anyway, later on, a few years later, another court says Drake's conviction was bullshit because of irrelevant and prejudicial evidence to do with the Bitemarks and stuff. So third hearing, 2014, Drake goes, fuck it, I'm going to plead to reduce charges. Like, you're right, I did some bad things. And he was released because he'd spent a bunch of time there. Like,
finally
right,
he
you've done some
to
murders, but for reasons that you acknowledge.
You've done 30 years in jail.
Yeah, off you go, champ. So, but this led to a bunch of other cases. Because of the Drake thing, a bunch of other cases that Walter had testified in were revisited.
Oh, Jesus.
As you would expect. So as of at least this year, at least 3 murder convictions, which are based a lot on Walter's testimony, have been overturned. And there's probably more. Like, there's so much more to this story than we can tell in one episode. Like, it's fucking rich and crazy. So we're kind of left with the question, why did Walter do it? Apparently money was not the motive. It wasn't about cash. Because they say, look, as it was put in this main article, his lifestyle had some flourishes. He slept in an antique Chinese bed. He played Tchaikovsky on a 1926 Chickering grand piano. Apparently that's a big deal.
Oh, that's cool. And then smoked a lot of durries and ate the chicken burgers.
And drank the Chardonnays.
Cheeseburgers, yeah.
Chicken burgers.
Cheeseburger, Chardonnay and Cools. Like, it's not an expensive lifestyle.
It's not. And apparently he lived pretty frugally. He drank bottom shelf wine was the quote.
Bottom shelf wine. Crappy
cars. He didn't live anywhere fancy. So it seems that it was about being egotistical, motivated to be noticed. So he loved to play the role of genius profiler.
Yeah.
And basically people say he cannot be in a social setting where he's not the center of attention, said one of the longtime members of the society. At meetings, apparently he would always speak last and he would render his judgments. Let me tell you what I think. He'd bring it on down from the mountain. Why did he keep getting away with it though? Because it's fucking wacky. Like there were suspicions all the way along, but people didn't do anything.
People want to hear this stuff?
I kind of feel like that might be part of it. One source, the case is, it's not about an imposter who goes undetected, who's close. A lot of people saw signs, but there was little incentive to do anything.
Yeah.
Because why do you fucking bother?
And in many of these, the people that a lot of people saw as the bad guys getting put in away.
Get rid of the bad guys.
Yeah.
Like Drake did kill people.
Well,
He did.
Yeah.
He did. So it's like, it's harder to go, you bastard, wrongfully convicted. It's like, no, he was just wrongfully sentenced.
Yeah, whether it was
so
a sex crime or he was just murdery. Like it's 2 different types of murder here.
But he did kill people.
Like it's not like it's.
And there's a great quote, a retired FBI agent who was working with the behavioural science unit, that one way back. So they said they once invited Walter to Quantico and asked him questions about inmate behaviours. And the quote is, "The narcissism, I think, was obvious. He really thought he knew a lot. The agents learned little and he was not invited back." He goes on, "Richard Walter is largely a poseur. What I say about Richard is he's an expert at being an expert, at playing one and convincing people that he is an expert. Expert at being an expert."
No one does that.
No, I would never do that.
No one does that.
Not deliberately.
No one does that.
So where is he now? As recently as 2019, he was still apparently available for work as a profiler. He was definitely active at the end of 2022 in some sense. So in October last year, he spoke at the North Carolina Homicide Investigators Conference. And then the author of this article that I've drawn on a lot, which is actually called "The Case of the Fake Sherlock. Richard Walter was hailed as a genius criminal profiler. How did he get away with fraud for so long?" So the author said he tried to contact him to interview him for this piece, which was written earlier this year. All requests were denied, and in very weird language. So here it goes. "You have earned one's distrust that merits severing any contact with you in the future, and under no circumstances would himself cooperate in your suspicious activities."
Would himself.
Himself.
Writing in the second person. Second person is weird.
Very weird.
Like, that's the weirdest. First person, third person, they're all fine.
You get it, yeah.
Second person,
you're a fucking psychotic. So he may be, this is at the end of last year, he may be in some sense active right now and today.
Can we get him on?
Could we?
Richard Walter,
If you're listening.
let's have a chat.
Kind of nod, straight face.